Hi, I'm Kevin McAfee, and welcome to Facets of Stone with Jeanne Nigro Ministries. And I'm here with Jeanne Nigro, and we are so excited to have another program of Facets together.
Oh, I can't wait, Kevin. I love talking to you about the facets of God's heart.
You know, I think this is true, and I'm scared to talk about it, but aren't you an Ohio State Buckeye?
I am. I graduated from Ohio State undergrad, and I am a true Buckeye from Ohio.
Okay, so I'm a Sooner, so we have trouble from the very beginning, but it's all good because we're still friends. You know, I happen to have cheered at the game, that Ohio State game with Uwe von Schamann, where he kicked the field goal, you know, there at that few seconds left and beat Woody Hayes and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And there was like 100,000 people screaming, going crazy. And that was a game I'll never forget.
I'll never forget Woody Hayes either.
Oh, no, but I love both schools. And I can tell you this, we've been talking a lot, especially about our backgrounds and our history. Tell everyone how Jeanne Nigro Ministries got started, because I really believe what's exciting to think about is how you got here.
How I got to Jeanne Nigro Ministries.
Yes.
Well, my heart has just always been, since I've known the Lord, to serve Him and to be involved in ministry. And so as soon as I prayed for many, many years. I mean, I've been a believer for 27 years.
Wow.
And as soon as I became a believer, because when I became a believer, I just went from death to life. It was a death to life experience. I mean, I wanted to kill myself, and then He gave me new life. So at that point, I wanted to be in ministry, but the door wasn't open, you know, and for many, many, many years.
And you really got to that place in your life where you didn't feel valued?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
I really never felt valued from the time I was born. Wow. So it was just, built over and over and over. And by the time I was 28 years old, I got to the point where I wanted to kill myself. Because I felt so worthless, so there was just no hope. I had struggled with the same things, with feelings of worthlessness, with not knowing what my purpose was in life, with a lot of rejection in relationships with men. So all those things came together, and it just felt completely hopeless. Like no matter what I could do, there was just absolutely no way out, no way to experience life.
You know what's amazing? I'm so excited because you've taken all of these elements in your life, and both the good and the bad, and you come together and you've finally written a book that I believe is so timely. Tell us about Unshaken.
Yeah. Well, the name of the book, Kevin, is Unshaken, and it's unshaken, but standing strong in uncertain times. Because the times are just, we don't have to watch the news for more than 5 minutes to be fearful or angry or frustrated or just want to hide under the covers. And so my heart is that, what is God's heart for us now? And how can I communicate that to you? And the essence of the book is that He is not calling us, Kevin, to fear or to passivity or to anger and frustration and stress, but to action. But we have to have intimacy with Him first before we can take action. And so as we connect with the facets of His heart, then we grow in intimacy with Him, and we align what we think and what we do with His heart. Then we know what action we can take right now, because things feel out of control. So.
I think a lot of times our lives are out of control. Things happen to us, we go through those experiences in our lives where it's difficult, and we go through loss, we go through pain, we go through divorce, we go through financial dismay, we lose our jobs, we lose family members. It's like there's so many things that cause us to be afraid.
Yeah.
And you really address in this book the strongholds that kind of put us in a prison. Does the book address how we get out of those strongholds?
I don't teach anything, Kevin, that doesn't have a practical application.
Okay.
I've been through a lot of training in my life, and there's nothing that frustrates me more than going through training and then what? It's just head knowledge. So I have to, I have a background in training as well, so I relate to that. But I have to teach something that when you walk out the door or when you finish that page of the book, you can apply it in your life right then. So part of, we want to be intimate with God, but oftentimes we wonder, how do we have intimacy with God? And we don't even realize what blocks intimacy. And things like fear and stress, for example, block intimacy with God. So I definitely address, how do we breakthrough. What are the spiritual weapons of warfare that God's given us to break through fear and stress, for example? And then when we break through that, then we can experience intimacy with God. But what happens is our fear and stress block that intimacy, and then we think, where's God? He's with you, Kevin, but not with me, you know, and we feel like he's distant, or we feel like he's just mad at us or disappointed in us, and we feel down, and then we end up looking just like anyone else who doesn't even know God.
It's so difficult for us all to resist becoming afraid. It's almost like our nature is to be afraid.
Yeah, it's true, and stress.
It's
much easier.
I specialize in it. I always tell people, as someone who is a fallen person,
it's one of your spiritual gifts.
I'm really good at pride of life. I'm excellent at lust of the flesh and lust of the eyes. I nail those. And so the combination of all of those failures, I think naturally we just are fearful people.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that you're helping us break through that in this book.
And you know what, Kevin, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because the book addresses uncertain times. Now that can mean uncertain times in your life, like you're saying, just from your relationships or your work or your finances or your children, but it can also mean the uncertain times of the world that we're in, the end times, the terrorism, the nuclear war threats, you know, all the things on the news. So we have uncertainty in our personal lives, but we also have uncertainty in the world. So the book addresses how do we respond to all of that.
I think that's really timely, and we only have a few seconds before break, but I really want you to address why the Jewish roots and these type of teachings are important for us.
Okay. The Jewish roots, how they're important for standing strong in uncertain times is that they are, one, they're a facet of God's heart. He's passionate. You know, he designed the feast. The Jewish people did not design the feast. They're the Lord's feast. So as we connect with what's passionate on his heart, we grow in intimacy with him, which helps us stand strong. But then also, and we'll get into this more later, is that we see that Jesus fulfilled the feast perfectly, the spring feast. And that gives us assurance that just as he fulfilled the spring feast, he will fulfill the fall feast. And that gives us an anchor of hope for the future.
That's exciting, and I can tell you this, if you want to learn more about the biblical feasts, just watch.
Most of us agree that there's so much about the Bible we don't know or even completely understand. Stories and people from a long time ago that document who God is, each providing a roadmap of how we are to live and who we are to God. Throughout the Bible, there are stories of feasts. Many are still observed today, especially within the Jewish culture. But very few of us know much about the feasts, and even less about the significance of what the feasts say about who God is.
Studying our Jewish roots and the biblical feast is so important, and Jeanne Nigro has created a CD series we believe can impact your life. You see, it helps us understand the facets of God's heart.
Author and teacher Jeanne Nigro travels the world teaching about the biblical feasts, the extraordinary way God reveals himself to us through the feasts, and the difference those truths can have in our lives.
Maybe you've been asking yourself this question: how could my family become more involved in the biblical feast? How could we learn and teach our children even more about these special traditions that were not created by the Jewish people but by God? You see, it was his plan to design these biblical feasts so that you could be a part. This entire series is designed just for you, for your church, for your group, your small group. It's a time when you can come together and really learn the facets of God's heart. We're so excited about the biblical feast. Today, make the decision that you're going to be involved as well.
Understanding the biblical feasts is one way to know God in a deeper and richer way. To learn more about this fascinating teaching, get the full CD series, The Biblical Feasts, at JeanneNigro.com. This is a teaching you'll want to have and share with others. The Biblical Feasts by Jeanne Nigro, available at JeanneNigro.com.
Hi, I'm Kevin McAfee, and welcome back to Facets of the Stone. What I'm really excited about is that action opportunity for you that we just talked about, how you can make the biblical feast a part of your life, is really indeed what Jeanne and I are talking about right now. You've written this book, Unshaken, and as part of the book, you've really addressed the Jewish roots of our faith.
Absolutely.
And the importance of how this was not just our idea.
That's right.
It was God's idea. And one of the things that I think is really important is for us to kind of spend some time sharing with us from the ministry how biblical feast should somehow dovetail into our lives, because I know we talk about it in your book.
The biblical feasts are such a part of our lives in so many ways. I mean, one is that the biblical feasts really tell you who God is. They reveal so much about his character, and they reveal so much about how he sees you. And so as we hold in our hearts, as we connect with what's on God's heart, how he sees you, who he is, then we grow in intimacy with him. And we can apply that. You know, I've had so much healing in my heart. We talked a little about strongholds a few minutes ago. I've experienced incredible healing in my heart of strongholds from observing the feast and what they tell me about how God sees me. And then also the feasts are a way of practicing for the future. When Jesus comes back, when Yeshua returns, he'll still be Jewish. And he will come back to Israel, to Jerusalem, to a Jewish temple, the millennial temple, and we'll be celebrating the feast with him. And so wouldn't you want to know what Jesus is going to do when he comes back and what you'll be doing with him? And so it's a part of practicing and preparing for our future with him.
It's something I've never thought about. I've never thought about, okay, I need to plan and prepare.
Your bridegroom.
So the bridegroom, when the bridegroom comes, that we have a chance as a group of people who do believe in Yeshua and believe in Jesus to celebrate those feasts with him. It's like it's an epiphany. It's like a light bulb that comes off that says, okay, I need to learn about this so that it's a way that I'm honoring him.
And it's a way of preparing for our future and giving us hope for our future. Because with all the uncertainty in our lives and in the world, we need something to look forward to. And we need something that we can take action on now. And there's so much that the feasts tell us about what we can do now that will bring healing to our hearts now, that will really, we can use and apply in our lives in the moment by moment. You know, it's in the moment by moment of your life. The thoughts, the emotions, the words, these interactions that we have with others, where intimacy with God either grows or we feel distant from him. And so when we can bring in what the feasts tell us about who God is and how he sees you into those moment by moment places of seeing our worth in him and how much he values you and how he cares about every detail of your life, the feasts just cry out so much about him. Then we grow in intimacy with him, and then we were preparing for his return, and we have hope. So they give us not only hope for the future, but very practical application in our life, everyday life today.
I think what you're doing too is it's like those dot to dot little drawings. You would take this dot and you'd go to here, and then it would be a picture.
Yes.
You're painting a picture in this book, and you're tying not just the feast, but millennial teachings to end times. So help us bridge that arc so we can understand how those dots connect.
Well, when Jesus comes back, when Yeshua returns, as I mentioned, we will be celebrating the feast with him.
Yes.
Ezekiel tells us that in the millennium. And the millennium is that 1,000-year period after Jesus returns, and he wipes out all the kings of the earth, and all Israel is saved, that he sets up his millennial kingdom where you and I have the incredible privilege of ruling and reigning over nations with Jesus. And that's exciting to me. And so I want to prepare for that now. And I look at it and I think, if I've got to learn how to reign over my own thoughts and words and emotions so that when a millennium comes, I get a big nation or at least a temple to work at. And so it's like, how are we going to rule over nations if we can't rule over our own thoughts and emotions and words? So that's a part of it. But then also, by knowing what God's heart is for the millennium, and I outline this, 10 facets of God's heart in the millennium in my book, that gives us an action plan for what we can do now, because what we do now continues on into the millennium. So even if we don't see the effects or the positive impact always of what we're doing now, fighting for righteousness, for example, we will see that in the millennium, and that's exciting, because I think with so much uncertainty, we wonder, what can we do to make a difference? And by knowing God's heart for the millennium, it gives us a roadmap and guidelines and an action plan. I have a 10-step action plan for what we can do now, because we need a purpose in life now. We need to know that what we do makes a difference.
And I think that also provides some hope for us, because,
Exactly.
you know, we talk about these uncertain times. We look at the news in the world, we look
we're
on our computer, and
fearful.
all of a sudden you're finding out, okay, some other bomber has taken up, or another building is down, another part of the world is compromised. I remember my mom, she used to call me and say, you're not going to New York in the next week.
Exactly.
You're not going to wherever in the next few
Exactly.
weeks. And the reason why is she was afraid
Beautiful.
because of what happens. And I think a lot of people, even people of faith, you know, we look at what's going on and we're looking for answers.
Absolutely. They said that we don't look any different from the rest of the world because we're caught up in fear and stress because of the news and everything else. And so what we end up doing is feeling like, well, I think I'll just hide out and wait till Jesus comes back. And he's not calling us to do that either. Look at the parable of the talents. He called the servant who did nothing, but hid out until the master came back. He called him the wicked servant who was cast into outer darkness. So I know that his will for us is not to do nothing.
You know what's interesting, and I want to say this just about you. It's very interesting to find a teacher in life that teaches about Levitical teachings, about the Jewish roots, about the end times, and is a woman in a man's world. You know, we always talk about, we look at the Bible and we see Esther and we see Ruth and we see Rahab and we see stories, but have you found it challenging, different, unique to come out as a woman and establish a ministry where you're teaching these kind of teachings at this time?
Yes, I think it is quite unique, and it's God's calling for me, and he's the one that's opened the doors, definitely. I mean, I can't do it on my own, but I just follow him and what he's called me to do, and I want to partner with him for releasing what he wants to do in these times.
That's what's exciting, and I'll tell you this, you can partner with Jeanne Nigro Ministries by buying the CD series you're getting ready to learn about regarding the biblical feast. We'll be right back.
Most of us agree that there's so much about the Bible we don't know or even completely understand. Stories and people from a long time ago that document who God is, each providing a roadmap of how we are to live and who we are to God. Throughout the Bible, there are stories of feasts. Many are still observed today, especially within the Jewish culture. But very few of us know much about the feasts, and even less about the significance of what the feasts say about who God is.
Studying our Jewish roots and the biblical feast is so important, and Jeanne Nigro has created a CD series we believe can impact your life. You see, it helps us understand the facets of God's heart.
Author and teacher Jeanne Nigro travels the world teaching about the biblical feasts, the extraordinary way God reveals himself to us through the feasts, and the difference those truths can have in our lives.
Maybe you've been asking yourself this question: how could my family become more involved in the biblical feast? How could we learn and teach our children even more about these special traditions that were not created by the Jewish people but by God? You see, it was His plan to design these biblical feasts so that you could be a part. This entire series is designed just for you, for your church, for your group, your small group. It's a time when you can come together and really learn the facets of God's heart. We're so excited about the biblical feast. Today, make the decision that you're going to be involved as well.
Understanding the biblical feasts is one way to know God in a deeper and richer way. To learn more about this fascinating teaching, get the full CD series, The Biblical Feasts, at JeanneNigro.com. This is a teaching you'll want to have and share with others. The Biblical Feasts by Jeanne Nigro, available at JeanneNigro.com.
Welcome back to Facets of the Stone. I'm Kevin McAfee with Jeanne Nigro, and we're here as part of Jeanne Nigro Ministries to talk about something very exciting. You've just heard about the biblical feast, and as we've been talking about the biblical feast and these end times and the uncertainty that so many of us go through, I think there's a stone that I'd like to turn over one more time of this
Okay.
facet and have you respond to it for us. And that is, once we understand the elements of the millennium and the elements of the feast and how they play, how does that impact our life and the intimacy that we have with God?
Well, when we connect with the facets of God's heart, what is passionate on his heart about the millennium and about the feast, then we grow in intimacy with him.
Got it.
So, for example, he gives us the biblical feast as times of a special appointment with him, to meet with him, to receive a special blessing, to have special intimacy with him. And so when we do that, we learn about who he is and how he sees us. So, for example, if he is passionate about let's take Passover and how everything happened perfectly. Jesus fulfilled the Passover lamb to the specific day, specific hour, moment, every detail screamed of him. And so what does that tell you about who God is? Well, he cares about every detail, and he has a perfect plan, perfect detail for everything, for Jesus, Yeshua, but also for your life. And so we can trust in a God like that. And then we look at, for example, the cups in a Passover Seder. And one of the cups has to do with redemption and what he did to pay for you, the price that he paid for you. And that's where we get our value. And so we gain our value and our sense of worth by what is communicated to us through Passover. Or we might look at even the feast of even Hanukkah, which is more of a kind of a bonus holiday. But what does that say about who God is? Well, it tells us so much about spiritual warfare, and it tells us about how we can stand strong in uncertain times, just like the Maccabees did, and how God was faithful when they were faithful. And so each feast shows us so much about who God is and how he sees you. Or Shavuot is all designed around a Jewish wedding ceremony. And so when you look at that, it's like God chose a wedding ceremony because he knew that was something that we could relate to that had to do with intimacy. He picked the most intimate relationship that we can think of, like a marriage ceremony, to communicate how he sees you, that he is married to you, that he desires you, that he enjoys you, that he just wants to spend time with you. And oftentimes when I write in the book about intimacy, I think of when you were in high school, did you have a crush? And did you think about them all the time? And did you talk about them all the time and wait for them to call you? Or you're a guy, we waited for you to call us. But God sees us the same way. He's obsessed with us. He can't stop thinking about you. He can't take his eyes off of you. And it's that sense of that we all want from a crush to meet that need, but only Yeshua can meet that need.
That's amazing, because to the very thought of God pursuing us, I don't know about you, but I wonder, why would he want to pursue me? And I think all of us feel that way. All of us have that tendency to feel like, why would he pursue us? Why through all of the pain, through the rejection, would he do that? And it seems like that seems to be a real central theme of your entire ministry.
That he can't stop loving you. He can't stop loving you no matter what. And I think, a central theme of the ministry is that intimacy with him. And not just intimacy with him, but being aware of and being committed to dealing with what blocks intimacy with him. Because I don't think the average person is aware.
No.
They just know they don't have an intimate relationship with God, or they
Right.
feel distant from God, but they don't really know why. They end up just blaming God. Well, because he must be busy with other people that are more spiritual. And I'm not spiritual like they are, and I don't have time to do Bible studies all day like they do. And so we think, well, we're just on this earth and we know God, we believe in him, but we'll know him better when we go to heaven. And we're waiting for heaven, whereas Jesus wants to bring heaven down to earth. That's his ultimate plan. And we can experience more of that the more that we experience, but not just experience intimacy, but be aware of what blocks intimacy. And so I address that.
I think that's so important, and I just want to take a few moments and just encourage you to do something. You can go to JeanneNigro.com, and we want to offer you this book. This book can help change your life. It can help create this desire in you to really know Yeshua and God better. And I cannot think of a more appropriate time in history than for you to have this book, JeanneNigro.com, Nigro.com. If you'll go to that website, you're going to see that this book can really do some things in your life. And I know that just as I've become more aware of my ancestry, of the Jewish roots of my faith, of the end times of intimacy, I probably have been unshaken 90% of my life. I think the title of what it means to be unshaken really describes a lot of people who go through struggles and difficulties and trials. And to think that that unshaken world can have a peace, a calm in the water, if you will, is exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. That we can remain unshaken. That even though the world around us is just changing so rapidly.
Tumultuous.
And our lives are changing. Yes, it is tumultuous, definitely. That we can still stand strong and experience intimacy with God. And that we can still, you can be unshaken and you can stand strong. You don't have to live in fear and stress. You know, Kevin, I think sometimes our culture tells us that we have to be in stress, that almost it's a part of the cultural norm, and that something's wrong with us if we're not stressed and not multitasking and not texting throughout the night. You know, we think that we're a loser or we're lazy if we're not doing that. But you know, Yeshua says his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And so when we're feeling stressed and burdened like that, we have to ask ourselves, what burden am I carrying that's not mine to carry?
I can tell you this, taking the time to stop, take a few moments and realize that God loves you and cares for you is really the why that this ministry was born. And we hope for you, as you've learned more about us, you can learn more about the biblical feast. As we close our program out today, we want to remind you to go onto our website, find out more about the biblical feast, the 7 major feasts of the Lord, with other bonus items on there. You're going to be moved. You are going to be more connected to the facets of God's heart. And we believe in doing that, you'll see that the stone is that same stone the builder rejected. Jesus, our Yeshua, our Messiah. God bless you and have a great week.
If you've enjoyed today's show, Facets of the Stone, we encourage you to find out more about the ministry work of Jeanne Nigro at JeanneNigro.com. There you'll learn more about the teachings from today's show, as well as other insightful topics. The biblical feasts, breaking free, and many more. Jeanne Nigro's teachings are available on CD, as well as her new book, Unshaken. Also, check out when Jeanne will be teaching in a city near you. For more information or to help support the work of Jeanne Nigro Ministries, visit us at JeanneNigro.com. Teachings that impact your life. Teachings that help you grow deeper in your relationship with God. JeanneNigro.com.